Welcome back to the Simone NBA Show, brought to you by Heavy Sports. I'm your host, Jack Simone. You can follow me on Twitter at Jack Simone NBA. You can follow Heavy on Twitter at Heavy on Sports, and you can follow Heavy on all their other social platforms, which are listed next to me on YouTube. And if you're not watching on YouTube, make sure to check that out and subscribe. But we're going to start off a little differently today. I had the pleasure of interviewing Grant Williams. It wasn't a podcast appearance or anything, but eBay reached out to me because Grant was at the 2022 National Sports Collectors Convention, and they asked me if I wanted a chance to interview Grant Williams. Obviously, if you know me, you know I'm a huge Grant Williams fan, so I said yes. I had the chance to interview, and I'm going to throw that at the beginning of this episode. So I talked to him about what he's working on this offseason, nicknames he could potentially give his teammates, and the origin of his Batman nickname that kind of blew up last season for the Celtics. So I hope you enjoy that, and after that, we'll get into some other topics in a normal podcast. But thank you so much for listening, and here's the interview with Grant Williams. Thank you to Courtney and Nicole, who helped me set it up through eBay. Thank you to Grant's team, and obviously thank you to Grant. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate you talking to me and the opportunity. And I first just wanted to start off in general, like, could you tell me about what you were doing with eBay at the Nationals this last weekend?
Yeah, so I was at eBay selling cards for the Wounded Warrior Project. All proceeds went to the Wounded Warrior Project and their live beta. So introduction is one of those things that as the time goes on, it'll get better and better. And I think that even just for the event that we did this past week, I thought it was amazing just because not only did the beta have success and you see the technology and the advancement that eBay is going to be able to progress and provide through the trading card and trading community, but also it was one of those things where it was just a good vibe at the National, a great community, and it allowed us to not like be a little more connected, but also enjoy the collectible side of eBay, because normally eBay you get anything in the world, but having the collectible side, being able to get your cards graded, being able to make sure that everything is up to standard is authentically guaranteed. That was incredible for me.
Yeah, I mean, eBay has it all. And that kind of bleeds into my next question is, are you a big trading cards guy? Just about the favorite cards you have, anything you've come across, can be Pokemon, NBA, anything you collect, just like what's your favorite that you have?
So I used to love Pokemon growing up. We had booklets and pamphlets of Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh cards. My mom actually threw those out, so I was very upset with her. Let's just say that. And my favorite card, I remember back then, I loved Yu-Gi-Oh! And Red Eyes Black Dragon. The card I had was sick. Even though it's not the most popular card, but I was a Joey guy, so it was pretty cool for me. And then when it came to Pokemon, I was a grass type guy because my family, my brother got to choose Charizard. He got first dibs every time. Because we'd get the game, we'd have to play through it with the same game. And next thing you know, you alternate starters. So Gabon was Squirtle and I was Bulbasaur. And next you know, you kept it moving generation by generation. So it was that's what I remember history-wise from my collectible tribe. Now starting my new collection now. I have a Mewtwo.
Hello, this is Editing Jack here. Grant's mic cut out for a couple seconds here, but he's talking about how he got his Mewtwo card graded. We'll talk about it in a second, just letting you know that you're not missing anything here. It's just post-editing magic, but we'll get back to it.
Did you hear all that?
I think you cut out a little when you were talking about the Mewtwo card a little bit, but you said you got them graded, is what you said?
Yeah, I got them graded. Sorry, I'm on the road, so that's why I might cut out a little bit.
No worries.
I got them graded. Mewtwo was a 9.5. Pikachu was a 10. It was a pristine 10. It was dope. I was hyped about that. It reminded me of exactly why I loved collecting cards back in the day. And that's where I will continue to do so. I'm trying to find a box that I can open myself on a stream or on a Twitch or even with eBay. I'd love to do that again because I feel like that'd be even more fun too. Yeah,
for sure. I saw your Twitch stream last night. If you ever need a Fall Guys partner, let me know.
Hey, listen, we'll be on sometime soon.
Sounds good. Next, I kind of want to dive into the NBA a little bit, talk about your game. Obviously, you took a huge step last season, one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA. What are you working on this offseason in the same way that you kind of molded your three-point shot for last year?
Shooting on the move, that's a big one. Not necessarily like Duncan Robinson shooting on the move, but more so pick and pop. Just make sure, like the shots that I am going to have to make this upcoming season because teams are going to run me off. Teams are going to be heavily contesting. So That's one. Defensively, I want to improve on guarding actions like screening actions, whether that's off ball or on, because I do a great job in isolation. I want to improve, say I'm guarding Steph or Trae Young coming off a screen and be able to negotiate and navigate those screens. And then the last thing is my finishing at the rim, whether that's through floaters or touch shots, where those in-between shots that if I'm not getting all the way to the rim for a layup, being able to have that in my arsenal.
Hey, I saw that and one layup against the Nets last year. Give yourself some credit. I think the finishing's there.
That was a layup, though. I'm trying to get the floater package now next, right?
Gotcha. Get it at the top of the key, Next up, I wanted to ask you about Batman, the nickname. Obviously, it kind of swept Twitter, swept the Celtics fandom last year. When did that start exactly? Was it you who came up with it, and what do your teammates think of it?
It was not me that came up with it. My father actually told me it 2 years ago when I guarded Joker and I guarded him well. And he said, we're going to call you the Batman from now on, goofily. And then the next season did it again, I guess, and played well. And so he texted me after the game, and I basically just joked with JB. I was like, my dad says you guys got to call me Batman from now on. And then JB said it to the media, and it just went from there. It stuck. So it's fun. I love it. It's a great nickname. I'll keep it forever if I can.
Yeah, you got to get the mask. You got to rock up one day when you're playing the Nuggets in the mask and the costume and everything.
I got to do that when we can see. If I do that and we lose, I feel like I look like an idiot, So
sure. You got to take the risk sometimes. Life's about risk,
Life's about risk, You can't be scared about it, right?
Always. So that again bleeds into my next question. I know you went through the list of, if your teammates were Marvel characters last year, but if you could give any of your teammates nicknames, like what would they be? They don't even have to be superheroes. Like I'm wondering if you thought about that, and even Ime Udoka, like any nicknames you've planned out for the guys over the season.
Oh, any nicknames? Oh, that's a great question. I'm actually going to think about that now. I haven't, but that's my next development. I'm actually going to think of all the nicknames that could potentially fly.
Please do. I'm eager to hear. So, I'm glad I can put the thought in your mind.
The next time we talk, I will have it for you.
I will write that down. I'll remember that. And then last question I have for you. You've been in the league for a few years now, obviously playoff runs, all that. Is there anybody in the NBA you love playing against the most?
I feel like I love playing against Giannis just because he brings that competitive edge every single night. Probably my favorite player to guard, favorite player to play against, just because as much as he's a nice guy off the court and everything like that, I've never had the time to spend time with him. I've heard a lot of great things, but on the court, he's so focused on winning, and that's the guys I respect the most in the league.
I got you. Yeah, well, that's all the questions I had. I also wanted to say I appreciated your tweet yesterday. I thought it was funny that you called out JT for the 75-pounders. I thought that was entertaining. So, but yeah, that's all I have written down for you today. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for talking to me. I gotta make sure JT is strong for next season. I gotta call him out.
For sure. I'll be waiting on those nicknames too. I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, sounds good. All right, talk soon.
Thank you so much again to Grant Williams, his team, and the nice people at eBay who helped me set that up. That was a pleasure and, a really unique experience that I'm glad I got the chance to do. But we're going to move into another topic, some original reporting at heavy.com from Steve Bulpett. Kevin Durant is going to meet with Nets ownership. Now, this report was 5 days ago, so at this point, Kevin Durant probably has met with Nets ownership. The quote from sources who spoke with Bulpett saying, "What I'm hearing is that KD is going to meet with the owner this week. He's going directly to the owner, Joe Tsai, sometime this week. We'll see how that works." The Durant saga has been going on for a while now, and NBA fans at this point are in one of a few camps. There's one camp that wants to get it over with. They want KD to just make a decision. There's one camp that wants him to just get traded. Obviously individual fans of teams want him to go to their teams, or they don't want him to go to their teams. In the case of the Celtics and Jaylen Brown, that's kind of the common sentiment. A lot of people don't want to make the trade. But it's dragging on. Kevin Durant is still not traded, and the Nets aren't going to trade him until they find the exact package that they want. But Kevin Durant isn't in a rush. And another quote coming out of this article from Steve Bulpett is, "I don't see KD being a hardline guy either. If they can't get a deal done, he's just going to say, F it. He'll play, and he'll play hard like he always does. I know KD, and he's not going to sit out or anything like that. He's not the kind of guy. There's no way he's not going to do anything like that." So that's an interesting point to note, because it sounds like KD isn't going to do what Ben Simmons did or do what Anthony Davis did. And not that those guys sat out under their own volition. Obviously, Ben Simmons was dealing with mental health issues and Anthony Davis was held out by the Pelicans. But it sounds like KD would just play for the Nets until they can find a trade for him. And part of this part of this article is discussing the idea of Kyrie as well. And the quote is, "My bet is they don't trade either one of them," said a source. "Maybe Kyrie. I don't see them trading Durant because they're not going to get back what they should. And I wouldn't trade him either. The hell with it. He signed the deal. The hell with it," right? So there's kind of conflicting ideologies when it comes to whether or not the Nets would/should trade Durant. Obviously, you don't want a player on the team who doesn't want to be there wholeheartedly. You saw that with James Harden, but based on what these sources are saying, Durant's not going to pull a James Harden where he, kind of goes half on the court. He tries half as hard. He's going to play hard regardless, but it's still tough knowing that he doesn't want to be there, right? Like you have to imagine some part of him is like, maybe he'll want a couple more days off. Maybe he won't try as hard on certain nights where they're losing. If he doesn't wholeheartedly want to be with that organization, then what's the point of being there? And you kind of heard a similar quote from Joe Tsai earlier this offseason, or not a quote, he liked a tweet basically saying, I'd rather have a bunch of guys who want to be there than a bunch of superstars who are, whatever, they're just there to get paid. And that's kind of what you're inching towards right now. Another source saying, talking about Durant's upcoming meeting, or at this point probably past meeting with Joe Tsai that we haven't heard anything about. That's probably why they won't get anything done and why they haven't had any conversations for a while. I don't think they're going to get anything done with Boston, and that's in reference to the fact that the Nets probably made some people mad. I think there's some teams that aren't very happy that when they talk to Brooklyn, it gets in the papers. A source told Bull Pet. That doesn't help. I've talked with a couple teams that are not happy with the rumors that creep out of there through all this. It's not a good way to do business. So you have the Nets supposedly making other teams mad because all this information gets leaked to the press. You have Durant, who's not happy in Brooklyn, but he'll still play regardless, which is again, a weird situation to be in. And then you have the Nets, who don't want to give him up for anything less. And I think that Rudy Gobert trade is coming back to bite the Nets because they don't want to get less for Kevin Durant than what the Jazz got for Rudy Gobert. So if the Gobert trade didn't happen, or it happened for less, you'd probably have seen other deals go down by now. But at this point, you have the Donovan Mitchell situation in Utah. Say that 5 times fast. The Russell Westbrook situation in LA. You have KD and Kyrie in Brooklyn. You have all these superstars just waiting to be traded. And until one of those dominoes falls, you're probably not going to see much else happen. And it seems like that Kevin Durant domino might have to be the first one that falls in order for everything else to get moving. But at the same time, you're hearing other rumblings, which we'll talk about later, of Donovan Mitchell deals getting going, of Russell Westbrook deals getting going. And maybe that's a sign that Kevin Durant's not going anywhere. They're not going to trade him immediately. But then the dangerous part becomes Kevin Durant's value is probably at an all-time high. Well, not an all-time high, but the highest it ever will be again. Right? Everyone's excited to trade for KD because he has 4 years left on his deal, and he's 33 years old. So he'll be old by the time his contract is up. But next year, he'll be even older. You're talking about trading for a guy. Obviously, it's Kevin Durant, so maybe it doesn't matter as much, but let's say the Nets keep him and wait till next offseason to trade him. You're talking about trading a 33-year-old with 4 years left on his deal versus a 34-year-old with 3 years left on his deal. That's a big difference. I don't care if it's Kevin Durant. That's a huge difference for teams wanting to make this trade, right? You're talking having 3 years left on a guy who is older versus 1 year younger and 4 years left. The Nets have to weigh that option too before they decide, no, we're not keeping him because we're not getting enough. And the Gobert trade was more about the picks, and they got some okay players too, but in a Kevin Durant trade, they're going to get a star. They're going to get a Tyler Hero. They're going to get a Jaylen Brown. They're going to get an OG Anunoby / Gary Trent / Siakam or whatever. They're going to get a Mikal Bridges. They're going to get a young potential all-star. The Jazz didn't get that. They just got a bunch of picks. So the Nets don't really need the picks aspect. They're more focused on the players. So in my opinion, I think they need to be less picky about the picks and comparing themselves to Gobert and just get the more quality players, which it looks like they're inching towards. But Nets have to weigh their options. Sounds like KD is going to meet with them to think of something soon. So in the next few days, maybe by the time you're even hearing this, I'm recording this on August 7th, we'll have heard about that meeting with Joe Tsai. But until then, we're kind of on standby till the Durant thing unfolds. Next, I want to talk about LeBron James, Los Angeles Lakers superstar, probably one of the greatest players, not even probably, one of the greatest players to ever play. He and the Lakers have met to discuss a contract extension. He's now eligible for said extension. He and the Lakers met this past Thursday to talk about it. Rich Paul, LeBron's agent who works for Clutch Sports, said contract discussions between the two sides were productive, and then new reports came out saying that all signs point towards both sides looking to extend their partnership together. That was reported by ESPN's Dave McMenamin. It's looking like LeBron's going to stay in LA. The real question is how long. Reporting James is entering the final year of his contract extension with the Lakers in 22-23 and is eligible to sign a 2-year, $97.1 million extension that would keep him in LA through the 24-25 season. He will be 38 by the time his current deal expires. Under the NBA's collective bargaining agreement, any player 38 or older is only eligible to sign a 2-year contract. This is reporting by Aaron Walsh of Bleacher Report. The interesting part about this is LeBron wants to play with his son. So that's where things come into question. James said in an interview with The Athletic's Jason Lloyd in February, again, this is a Bleacher Report article I'm reading by Aaron Walsh. He said this in an interview with Jason Lloyd. My last year will be played with my son. Wherever Bronny is at, that's where I'll be. I would do whatever it takes to play with my son for 1 year. It's not about the money at that point. Bronny James is eligible to be drafted in 2024. LeBron James is eligible for an extension through the 24-25 season. So, realistically speaking, how this will probably play out is LeBron will sign an extension with the Lakers for 2 more years. There will be 1 year of him competing against his son in the NBA. And then the last year, LeBron will just go to whatever team picked Bronny James and play with him there. Reporting from Brian Windhorst also saying, this is kind of a side note, one team to watch when it comes to a potential, LeBron James's next situation is the Cleveland Cavaliers. They have, he pointed out, they have a better young core than they had when LeBron James came back the first time when he came back from Miami. They have the assets to trade for him. They will eventually have the money to land him. The question is, do they just draft Bronny James, right? Because realistically speaking, any team that drafts Bronny James in 2024, if he gets drafted, maybe he'll go undrafted. I don't really know exactly where he stands in those rankings at the moment, but whatever team drafts him will get LeBron James too. So is it worth it for a contending team to just draft Bronny James? And keep in mind, this will be a 38-year-old LeBron. I know up until this point, he hasn't really slowed down at all. He's just, arguably gotten better every year. He just averaged 30 points, but you have to take into consideration that maybe he won't be playing as full force as he is right now. Like, there has to be some strategy when it comes to drafting Bronny. It's going to be one of the weirder situations we've seen. Like, that's going to be the whole story of that draft, to a certain extent, is not only are you drafting Bronny James, you're also effectively drafting LeBron, because that you're going to have a season of just Bronny, but then the next year, if LeBron does sign this 2-year extension, you're going to have LeBron there as well. So that's the other thing. Does LeBron only sign a 1-year extension with the Lakers so he can just go to whatever team drafts Bronny immediately and then play 1 year and then retire? Does he want that extra year of extra money with the Lakers first? And that's the question. I think that'll depend on what team the Lakers put around him this summer, and they've done an okay job. There's a lot of people, coming at the Lakers for poorly putting together this roster. There's this one image on Twitter that went viral of their quote-unquote closing lineup. It was Austin Reeves, Troy Brown Jr., Juan Toscano-Anderson, LeBron, and AD. But call me crazy, that's better than last year, right? I'd rather have all of these young guys hungry and ready to compete for their time in the NBA than these aging veterans who just clearly couldn't hold up with the younger NBA. So I like the Lakers roster approach this past offseason than last year's. So I think they'll be better. I don't think they'll be good enough to compete in the East unless they get a bunch of more depth, around LeBron and AD, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in other rumors. But the contract extension thing, it looks like LeBron will probably sign the 2-year extension through 24-25. Bronny James will come into the league in 2024. There'll be a year of like LeBron competing against his son on whatever teams they're on, the Lakers for LeBron and whatever team Bronny's on. Maybe the Lakers draft him. Maybe the Lakers just say, you know what, LeBron, we like you. We want you here for the rest of your career. We'll take LeBron, Bronny James. But regardless, after this next extension, LeBron will probably just play one more season wherever Bronny is, and then move on. Maybe that could work out better. Give Bronny a year to figure the NBA out for himself before he's playing with his dad, which could be a little bit not weird because it seems like they have a good relationship, but give him a year of space, figure it out, and then next year playing with his son, which is going to be a crazy story. That's going to be super fun to watch. But LeBron James working on an extension with the Lakers. Keep an eye on that compared with the Bronny situation, who is draft eligible in 2024. Next up, I want to talk about the Miami Heat, who don't really have a power forward right now. If you look at their starting lineup right now, it seems like they'd probably be forced to run out something along the lines of Kyle Lowry, Tyler Hero, Max Strus, Jimmy Bam, right? Like Jimmy might have to play power forward unless they want to throw Caleb Martin there, run double bigs with Omer Yurtseven, because they lost PJ Tucker in free agency to the Sixers, and there's a whole tampering investigation going on there. Regardless, blah blah blah. However, Sean Devaney of Heavy spoke with an executive who thinks that Gordon Hayward could actually be Miami's quote-unquote plan B if they don't end up landing KD or Donovan Mitchell, which, if you know the Miami Heat, they're obviously in the talks for stars. But the quote from the executive saying, if you want to give up Tyler Hero before you pay him and you want to move Duncan Robinson, you might have to add a pick, but those two guys and Omer Yurtseven, that might be enough to get you Hayward if the Hornets decide to reconfigure. It's a short-term move for Miami, but they need to make their move now. You can play him at the 3 and go big, or go small at the 4. He's a guy they've had interest in before. Hayward seems like the perfect type of player that would fit in with what Miami needs. Obviously, he's not the defender that PJ Tucker is, but he's at his best. He's one of the more efficient scorers in the NBA. He's not a bad defender, and he's a great secondary or tertiary ball handler that you could put out there on the floor. At his peak, he was an all-star, obviously. He hasn't been there. He's been solid in Charlotte, but there's the injury issues as well, which the Heat would have to consider. But if the Hornets were able to get Hero, Duncan Robinson, and Yurtseven, and a pick for Gordon Hayward, they'd probably, snap their fingers and make that happen immediately. That seems like a lot for Gordon Hayward, especially where the Hornets are at as a franchise, right? Obviously, issues beyond their control happened this offseason. We don't have to talk about those, but they're going to have to pivot here. And getting off of Hayward's contract is probably towards the top of their priority list. And they shouldn't have a problem running into next season with Hayward. Him and Rozier are a solid core around LaMelo Ball, and they've got good players coming up the pipeline too. But hitting the reset button with Tyler Hero and LaMelo Ball would probably be a better young core. If it's the issue of salary matching, then the Heat would probably have to throw in one of those younger pieces. Maybe they can get away with keeping Yurtseven if they like him, throw in Haywood Highsmith instead. Don't give up Tyler Hero instead. Give up Oladipo instead. But if the Heat don't want to pay Hero, then maybe they're willing to give Hero to Charlotte. But that seems like a perfect trade for the Hornets, getting Hero, Duncan Robinson, and then, Highsmith, Yurtseven, whatever, for Hayward. You dump that long-term salary. They could then pay Hero to put him alongside LaMelo Ball. They'd have to figure out a defensive thing because that backcourt might be a disaster. But with Steve Clifford at the helm, they'll figure something out on that side of the floor. So that'll be something interesting to watch. It's weird to think that the Hornets could get Hero for Hayward, but from the perspective of the Heat, Hayward's a good player, and at the end of this current contract, they would be able to probably re-sign him for a lot cheaper. Like, he's not going to be making $30 million forever. So it could be worth it for them to consider that deal. He's got 2 more years on his deal. He'll be making $30 million this upcoming season and then $31.5 the year after that. So obviously the Heat would be paying a lot of money to their top guys, Lowry, Hayward, Butler, and Bam. However, that would also get them off the long-term money of Duncan Robinson. It would avoid them having to pay Tyler Hero, and then they probably wouldn't have a ton of money to spend once the Hayward deal was up. But by the time the Hayward deal is up and the Lowry deal is up, then you could be talking. Then we could be saying, okay, maybe Miami could have a little bit of money to spend now, right? Because Hayward's deal is going to be up in the 23-24 season. Lowry's deal is going to be up in the 23-24 season. So at that point, you're talking about 2 more seasons of this current core. You'd have 2 seasons of Lowry, Hayward, Jimmy, Bam, Max Strus, Caleb Martin. That's still a Eastern Conference Finals contender, borderline Finals contender with how they played last season. Depending on health and everything like that, they'd have MLEs, blah, blah, blah. And then after the 23-24 season, Miami would have a lot of money to spend. They'd have 2 max contracts in Jimmy and Bam, but they'd be off the Duncan Robinson contract. They'd be off the Hayward contract that they just traded for, and they'd be off the Kyle Lowry contract. And if Lowry and Hayward want to take pay cuts to come back and play for them, that's great. Because at that point they'll be older. Lowry will be like 37, and Hayward will be up in the 30s as well. He'll be around 34. They could come back and keep competing, and then they could have more money to spend that offseason to build around Bam Adebayo. Caleb Martin would still be under contract by then. Nikola Jovic would. They're going to have to worry about extensions for Gabe Vincent and Max Strus. That could be the other issue. But they could overpay for those guys because they've been in their system. So the Hayward deal could work out for both sides. It's weird to think of a Hero for Hayward swap because, Hayward's this veteran who's considered overpaid and Tyler Hero is this young star. But it could work out for the Heat in the long run if they don't want to pay Tyler Hero and they'd rather spend money to build around Bam in a couple of seasons. So watch out for that. That report, again, from Sean Devaney of Heavy.com. Maybe something interesting to watch. And lastly, in Jack's Corner, we're going to be talking about this wild 3-team trade coming from Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype. And apologies if I pronounce your name wrong, but it's between the Jazz, the Knicks, and the Lakers. Essentially, Utah, this is the quote. The proposed 3-team trade scenario would include Westbrook going to Utah and getting bought out. Utah would send Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks, a combination of 2 players, including Patrick Beverley and Jordan Clarkson, Bojan Bogdanovic or Beasley. So essentially Beverley and then one of Clarkson, Bogdanovic, or Malik Beasley to the Lakers. And then the Jazz would receive significant draft pick compensation from the Knicks and the Lakers. Knicks would also have to part ways with veteran salary fillers such as Derrick Rose to make the salaries work. The Lakers have also had interest in trading for Knicks forward Cam Reddish, who could also become a part of the trade. Last season, the Lakers nearly acquired Reddish as a part of a blockbuster 3-team trade talks between the Lakers, Knicks, and Raptors at the time. A lot of words there, but essentially saying that the Lakers could be interested in dumping Westbrook's contract to the Jazz, getting back Beverley and then one of 3 depth pieces from Utah, while the Knicks would get Donovan Mitchell. In this proposed trade scenario, the Jazz wouldn't be getting, the Obi Toppins of the world, the Quickleys of the world, which I think would probably be a mistake. But if they want to fully tank for Victor Wembanyama, then I guess it's not the end of the world getting those players back who could potentially win them more games than they want to win. But for Danny Ainge, it's always going to be about those draft picks. So if he can manage to snag those 2 Lakers draft picks, 27, 29, in this deal, that'd be huge for them. And for the Lakers, I think Kyrie Irving would probably still be the top priority, but it's sounding like he's fine going into next season, playing with the Nets, and then just signing with LA next offseason. So for the Lakers, getting back Patrick Beverley, and then out of Clarkson, Bogdanovic, and Malik Beasley, I'd probably lean towards wanting Malik Beasley, but any of them would be fine for them in that scenario. That's a good core, right? That probably wouldn't make them like finals contenders because of how talented the West is, but a lineup of Patrick Beverley, Malik Beasley, LeBron, AD, and then whoever else you throw out there, Kendrick Nunn maybe if he can get healthy, Austin Reeves, et cetera, Juan Toscano Anderson, something like that, or Cam Reddish in this case, that'd be Patrick Beverley, Malik Beasley, Cam Reddish, LeBron, AD, or if you'd rather Bojan Bogdanovic so he can play that power forward position so LeBron doesn't have to take on as much of a challenge or play up as much in size, then you get that back. Maybe you get both and throw a couple seconds to the Utah Jazz. Regardless, that could be interesting for the Lakers. For the Jazz, they'd get their picks. The Knicks would get Donovan Mitchell. End up being a win-win-win for all parties involved. I thought that was interesting. The Cam Reddish thing I think is particularly interesting as the Lakers attempt to build out this roster. It'll be interesting to see what they do. I think they've done a good job of signing young players, like I said earlier this podcast. But yeah, keep an eye on that trade from Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype, who was reporting that. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting as the offseason drags on. And I think that will do it for today's episode of the Simone NBA Show. Like I said, I'm recording this on August 7th. It'll probably be out in the next couple of days, the 8th, the 9th, or 10th, around then. Thank you so much for listening or watching. If you're on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button. I hope you enjoyed the Grant Williams interview that was at the start of this episode. I really enjoyed doing that. Thank you to Grant again, his team, and then Nicole and Courtney from eBay for helping me set that up. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at Simone NBA. Follow Heavy on Twitter at Heavy on Sports. Subscribe to their YouTube, which is just Heavy. TikTok, Heavy_sports. Instagram, Heavy on Sports. Thank you again to Heavy, obviously, for sponsoring and helping me run this podcast. Again, hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Peace out.